It was a Wednesday evening, and the room was almost completely dark. I was 11 years old, sitting at the kitchen table watching my great-aunt prepare to make the most significant financial decision of her life. Whether to sell the building her late husband had left her, the building that had supported the family for 16 years, or to hold it through a crisis that had already cost her 2 tenants and 3 months of sleep. She was not on the phone with a lawyer. She was not reading a spreadsheet. She was standing at the counter, striking a single match and touching it to the wick of a white candle she had placed in the center of the table. She sat down. She folded her hands, and for 4 minutes, I counted because I was 11 and 4 minutes of silence felt like an hour. She did not speak. She did not move. She simply sat in the light of that one small flame. Then she opened her eyes, exhaled slowly, and said, "We hold it." 18 months later, the building had tripled in value. I did not understand what I had witnessed that night. I thought it was ritual. I thought it was sentiment. I thought it was the kind of thing older women from her generation did when they were uncertain. A comfort practice, a beautiful habit, something that made them feel better but did not actually change anything. I was wrong. And the 33 years I have spent since that evening studying the Kabbalistic and Talmudic wisdom traditions have shown me exactly how wrong I was, and exactly why what my great-aunt did in that kitchen was not sentiment at all. It was precision. It was the application of an ancient technology of the mind that certain families have used for thousands of years to make decisions that hold, that prosper, that do not collapse 2 years later when the fear that drove them finally catches up. Today, I am going to teach you that technology. Not the surface of it, the architecture, the reason it works, the specific way to practice it, and the layer of it that most people, even people who come from this tradition, have never been shown. My name is Rabbi Naomi. I have spent 33 years inside the Kabbalistic and Talmudic traditions, not as an academic exercise, but as a living practice passed to me directly by teachers who received it from their teachers in an unbroken chain. I did not come to this in a classroom. I came to it sitting across a table from a woman who had rebuilt her household twice from nothing, and whose financial decisions, across 60 years, had an accuracy and a steadiness that I have rarely seen replicated. What she carried was not luck. It was not talent. It was a practice. And I am going to give you the core of that practice today with the same precision she gave it to me. Stay until the very end of this teaching. I mean that seriously. What I am going to share near the close, the warning, the thing that happens after you begin this practice, is the piece that protects everything else. Without it, you will apply the teaching halfway and conclude that it did not work at the exact moment it was beginning to. So stay. Every word today is part of one complete thing. Before we go one step further, I want you to type the words "light before I decide" in the comments right now, not after the video, now, before you watch another second. In the ancient tradition, the act of stating an intention before you have fully received the teaching is itself a form of preparing the vessel. You are not declaring that you already know. You are declaring that you are ready to receive. Light before I decide. Write it in the comments now. Let me tell you what is actually happening when you make a major decision, financial, relational, professional, from the state most people are in when they make them. You are making it from inside a storm. Not necessarily a dramatic storm. Sometimes it is a very quiet storm. The low hum of anxiety, the pressure of a timeline, the weight of other people's opinions pressing against your thinking, the accumulated history of every financial decision you have made before that did not go the way you hoped. And from inside that storm, what you call a decision is often not a decision at all. It is a reaction. It is the part of your nervous system that has been under pressure long enough that it finally produces an output just to end the discomfort of uncertainty. And that output wears the clothing of a decision. It uses the language of deliberation. It uses phrases like, I have thought about this carefully. I have weighed the options. I have considered the risk. But underneath it, driving it, is not wisdom. It is relief-seeking. The decision was not made to create the best outcome. It was made to stop the feeling of not knowing. And decisions made from relief-seeking, rather than from clarity, have a very specific signature in people's lives. They feel right at the moment of making them. They feel like release, like finally, like the weight lifting. And then, somewhere between 3 months and 2 years later, they reveal themselves as exactly what they were, a reaction to pressure dressed in the clothes of a choice. I have seen this in 33 years of working with families around wealth and decision-making so many times that it no longer surprises me. What surprises me is how rarely people trace the collapsed outcome back to the state they were in when they decided. They blame the market. They blame the partner. They blame the timing. They almost never say, the decision was made from the wrong place inside me, and that is what failed. This is not a character flaw. This is not weakness. This is the predictable, documented behavior of a mind under sustained stress, a mind that has been carrying the weight of an unanswered question for longer than it was designed to carry it. And no amount of more information, more analysis, more careful conversations with advisors, more research, more comparing and contrasting, and building of pro and con lists changes the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is the state of the mind doing the deciding. You cannot fix the quality of a decision by adding more data to a processor that is running hot. You cannot produce clarity by pouring more thinking into a system that is already overwhelmed by its own thinking. You have to settle the processor first. You have to change the inner condition before the outer question can be seen clearly. And this precise, elegant, thousands of years tested understanding is what the candle practice is actually about. It is not spiritual theater. It is not the performance of wisdom. It is a technology as functional and as repeatable as any technology you use in the physical world for shifting the state of the mind that is about to make a choice that will shape your life. I want you to understand something about fire in the Kabbalistic tradition because it is not decorative and it is not metaphor. The ancient teachers described fire as the only physical element that simultaneously destroys and illuminates. Every other element moves in one primary direction. Water flows down, earth holds still, wind moves laterally. Fire is the one that transforms while it lights. It consumes what is not essential and reveals what is true. This dual nature, the purification and the illumination together, is precisely why fire appears at the center of the holiest rituals in this tradition. Not because it is beautiful, though it is, because it is functional. Because something about the human nervous system, when placed in proximity to a living flame, responds in a way that no other environmental cue reliably produces. The breath slows, the visual field softens and narrows. The internal noise, the cycling of anxiety, the rehearsal of outcomes, the arguing of options, begins to thin. Modern neuroscience calls this a parasympathetic shift. The ancient teachers called it hakana, preparation, the entering of the correct inner state before an act of significance. They understood this thousands of years before there was clinical language for what happens in the prefrontal cortex when the threat response of the nervous system deactivates. They simply observed it, named it, and built it into daily practice with an exactness that I find, after all these years, genuinely astonishing. Now let me give you the practice with precision, because vagueness is where wisdom goes to be forgotten. The first principle: you must light the candle with your own hand, and you must light it with intention, not habit. This sounds small. It is not. The act of striking the match, of bringing the flame slowly to the wick, of watching the light take hold. When done with full attention, with a clear internal statement of purpose, this act begins a neurological sequence that signals to your entire system what comes next is significant. I am entering a different quality of attention. You are not turning on a lamp. You are performing a deliberate gesture that your mind and body will recognize over time and with repetition as the beginning of clarity. The families that have preserved this practice do not light the candle the way they turn on a screen. They light it the way you approach something that deserves care, slowly, with both hands steady, with your full presence behind the action. The second principle: sit with the flame for a minimum of 3 minutes before you allow the decision to enter your thinking at all. Not 3 minutes of assessing whether you are calm enough, not 3 minutes of reviewing the pros and cons while technically sitting near the candle. 3 minutes of letting the flame hold your attention. Watch it move. Watch the way the light shifts on the surfaces around it. Breathe at the pace the flame suggests, which is slower than the pace you arrived with. This is not formal meditation. You do not need a practice or a lineage or a cushion. You need 3 minutes of genuine attention on the living light before the question enters the room. What those 3 minutes produce, reliably, in a nervous system that has been operating from urgency, is what the tradition calls menuchat hanefesh, the settling of the soul, the quiet beneath the noise, the state from which real discernment becomes possible. The third principle requires a specific kind of courage, and I want to name it as courage because it genuinely is. Once you have sat in the quiet, ask the question once, out loud or in a clear inner voice, and then wait for the first response that arrives from stillness rather than from momentum. Not the fastest thought, not the answer that has been rehearsing itself in your head for the past 3 days. The first response that arises from the settled place after the urgency has thinned. There is a felt difference between the two, and you will recognize it once you have experienced it. The answer that comes from the unsettled mind arrives with pressure behind it. It argues for itself. It comes defended, with reasons stacked behind it like armor. The answer that comes from the settled place arrives differently, quieter, with less urgency, with a quality the tradition describes as knowing rather than deciding. My great-aunt called it the answer that does not argue. It does not need to convince you. It simply is. The fourth principle: write it down immediately. The moment the clear response comes, before you analyze it, before you interrogate it, before you bring it to anyone whose opinion carries weight with you, write it down in one sentence, not a paragraph of justification, one sentence that names the direction. This step is critical because the mind that returns to urgency after the practice ends, and it will return, because urgency is the trained default of a mind shaped by modern life, that mind will work to revise what you received in the stillness. It will introduce doubts that were not present in the quiet. It will generate reasons why the clear response was naive or premature, or not accounting for this factor or that risk. And if you have not written it down, it will slowly and convincingly replace the answer from clarity with a new answer from fear, and you will not even notice the substitution. One sentence. Write it before you move. The fifth principle is the one I find is most consistently skipped, even by people who have embraced the rest of the practice. You do not bring this practice to a decision that has a deadline in the next hour. The candle practice is not an emergency tool. It cannot undo in 3 minutes the pressure that has been building for 3 weeks. The families that use this most effectively do not reserve it for crisis moments. They practice it regularly in low-stakes moments, quiet evenings when nothing is pressing, small choices that do not feel important enough to require it. They practice it there precisely so that the quality of settled clarity it produces becomes familiar, becomes the baseline state from which they operate, so that when the genuinely significant decision arrives, the inner condition it requires is not something they must manufacture under pressure. It is something they already live in. This is what my great-aunt understood that I could not see at 11. She was not using the candle to solve a problem. She had been using it for 40 years to maintain a quality of inner life from which problems could be seen clearly. The decision about the building was not difficult for her because of the candle she lit that evening. It was clear because of every candle she had lit for the 4 decades before it. The evening I witnessed was not an isolated event. It was a single expression of a practice. And what looks like astonishing wisdom in one decisive moment is almost always the accumulated clarity of 1,000 quiet ones before it. The 6th principle is what I consider the seal of the entire practice, and it is the one that the tradition was most protective about sharing publicly. After you have received your answer in the stillness and written it down, protect it. Do not take it immediately to the most anxious person in your life. Do not post it for reaction. Do not bring it to someone whose fear is louder than their wisdom and ask for their confirmation. Hold it for 24 hours before you share it with anyone whose uncertainty could displace it. The tradition calls this shimur, guarding. There is a teaching that says a word spoken before its time is a seed planted before the ground is ready. What you received in the stillness is real, but it is tender in the first hours. Other people's fear, even well-meaning fear, even the fear of people who love you deeply, can unsettle it before it has had time to take root in you completely. Hold it for 1 day, let it become solid, then bring it to the world. Now I need to give you the warning I promised, because without this, the practice will break at exactly the moment it needs to hold most. Somewhere in the first 3 to 5 weeks of practicing this, sitting with the candle, doing the preparation, receiving the answer from the settled place, you will make a decision that does not produce the outcome you hoped for. Not because the practice is broken, because clarity and outcome are not the same thing. The practice does not guarantee that every clear decision produces a perfect result. What it guarantees, and I use that word carefully and deliberately, is that you are deciding from your wisest available self rather than from your most frightened one. And a person who consistently decides from their wisest self builds something over time, across years, across the full arc of a life, that the person deciding from fear simply cannot build. Do not measure the practice by one outcome. Measure it by the quality of person it is making you. That person, the one who chooses from clarity rather than reacting from pressure, that is the person whose financial life has room to grow. If you want the complete architecture, all 7 principles of the Hachana practice as it has been preserved in this tradition, including the specific words spoken before lighting, the practice for when clarity does not arrive in the first sitting, and the teaching on how to use this with a spouse or partner so that major household decisions carry the same quality, it is in the resource linked in the description below. It is for the person who is ready to move from understanding this to actually practicing it. If you watch this entire teaching, you are likely that person. What surprised you most in today's teaching? I genuinely want to know. Tell me in the comments. Not what confirmed what you already believed, what caught you off guard, what landed somewhere unexpected. When you name what moved in you, you begin integrating it. And I want to know who is truly here and paying attention. write it below. If this channel is giving you something week after week that you are not finding anywhere else, wisdom that is precise, that respects your intelligence, that goes beneath the surface, subscribe now. Every week we go this deep, and what is coming in the weeks ahead is some of the most grounded and practical material from this tradition that I have ever put into teaching form. Press that button so you are here when it arrives. And if you felt something get quiet in you while you were watching, if even for a moment the noise thinned and something underneath it became briefly, clearly audible, press the like button. It tells the platform that this kind of content belongs in front of more people. Someone right now is about to make a major decision from the wrong state inside themselves, and they do not know this practice exists. Your press of that button might be the thing that puts this teaching in front of them before they decide. That matters. Do it now. You came here, I think, because something in the title recognized something in you. The part of you that already suspects that the quality of your decisions has less to do with the information you have and more to do with the state you are in when you make them. That suspicion is correct. It has always been correct. And you now have the practice that the families who understood it earliest have used to build and protect what matters most. Begin tonight. 1 candle, 3 minutes, 1 question, 1 sentence written down. That is the whole thing. That is all of it. May your decisions carry the weight of wisdom and the lightness of a mind that is finally, genuinely still. May what has been unclear become clear in the quiet, and may the flame you tend in the small moments be precisely the light that guides you through the large ones. Go in peace. Shalom.